I'm excited. Look at this massive crowd who showed up to hear me speak. Thank you all for being here. My name is Matthew Spoke. I'm the founder of the Aion project. I'm also the CEO of the company behind Aion called Nuco. We're a Toronto-based blockchain infrastructure company. We've been operating for about 2 years. We've been doing kind of core protocols for primarily the enterprise market, now focusing very heavily on how do we get blockchains to communicate with each other, how do we get transactions to be able to trigger across blockchains, and how do we solve this kind of this problem of interoperability between chains. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit about the challenge that we're facing and why we're developing a solution to this and how we're developing the solution. So let me walk you through this. So most of you are really familiar with kind of the evolution of what's happened in the blockchain industry. Technologies like Bitcoin that led to both enterprise technologies like Ripple, but also to an enormous number of altcoins that got created right around the same time. After that, we saw the evolution of technologies like Ethereum, then the creation of things like Hyperledger, the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance that I sit on the board of directors of, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The trend we're working towards is this concept that we call hypergrowth of blockchain protocols. Essentially, we don't see anything slowing down. We see an enormous number of core protocols getting developed month by month, week by week, new protocols getting released that have new features, new characteristics, and are solving kind of niche versions of the same problem. So what does this lead us to? This leads us to a set of problems that are going to lead to the next layer of infrastructure that we need to solve as an industry, which is interoperability. So with all of these protocols, we end up with a massively isolated system where every network essentially is not designed to talk to the network next to it. We end up with a scalability challenge where any one network can't seem to sustain the number of transactions we need. We end up with a privacy problem where some networks are too public for kind of private corporate transactions, and a performance problem where we can't seem to push enough transactions through. So that's why we're building Aion. Aion is the third generation blockchain network that kind of tries to solve a lot of these issues. Essentially what we're building is a routing system, a decentralized routing system that sits in the middle of a whole bunch of different blockchains. So a blockchain network that connects to other blockchain networks such that transactions get routed from one network to another. So if you think about it from a really, really high level, imagine writing a transaction on Ethereum that could autonomously be triggered as a result of a transaction on Tezos, or on a Hyperledger network, or on Corda, so that you can create this kind of decentralized communication of events that have taken place on different blockchains. So we break this down into 3 major characteristics of what Aion is designed to do: federate, scale, and spoke. Federating is essentially allowing a transaction to move across blockchains without the need of a centralized intermediary. The irony of our industry is that we've created these new massively powerful centralized intermediaries and exchanges. If we want to move transactions from Bitcoin to Ethereum, we go through Kraken, we go through Poloniex, we go through some sort of centralized intermediary for that process. So how do we create a federated system where transactions can flow without that? How do we scale applications so that you don't need to route your application on a single blockchain? If you want to build an app today on Ethereum, you've got 3 things about that app. Its input has to come from the Ethereum network. Its logic has to execute on the Ethereum network, and its output has to trigger within the Ethereum network. What if I wanted to create an application that streams its logic from multiple subnetworks, pulls inputs and outputs from different networks, and is able to connect seamlessly without centralized intermediaries? That's our concept of scaling applications. And then finally, this idea of creating spokes in a hub and spoke model where I can spin up and develop my own blockchain very simply that connects back into an ecosystem of blockchains. Why we think this is important? I mean, our prediction is that we're moving towards a future state of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of individual blockchains. Some of which that will get built on the same protocols, some of which that will get built custom with new protocols, all of which are going to have the ability to communicate with each other. We use the analogy of a blockchain being essentially a very modern version of a computer system, but nobody has yet built TCP/IP to connect all of these computers to each other. So that's what we're building with Aion. We refer to our architecture as a multi-tiered blockchain system, essentially layers of blockchains that can bridge through each other, where you can send transactions across a bridge, which is essentially a decentralized group of nodes that will witness and signal to the next network on the chain that a transaction has taken place, and then incentivizing these bridges to get built and managed. The one thing that we're building into our token that becomes pretty important in the long-term vision of what we're designing is today you've got these currency systems and token systems that are rooted on top of single blockchains. If you build an ERC20 token today, that means your token is pegged to the Ethereum blockchain. So what we're designing in our token as part of our fundraising process is the first cross-blockchain token. A token that it can essentially be in existence on more than one blockchain at the same time, so long as you can prove the ownership of that token. So we're developing a token on top of the Ethereum chain that will be able to seamlessly migrate back and forth between Ethereum and the Aion 1 blockchain, and then eventually migrate from that blockchain onto any other blockchain connected in the ecosystem. You can think of this kind of high level as like a teleportation concept where you can make a token disappear on one network and instantly make it appear on another network and have a cohesive network of a token that sits on top of more than one blockchain. The Aion 1 network is this router that I was mentioning to you. So at the core of the Aion system is a new blockchain we're developing that has a token, a coin getting built into it called the Aion token that does 4 major functionalities, and we've got 2 other functionalities that are currently being researched. The first main chain operation is your basic kind of blockchain functionality. The token is used to incentivize people to participate in the validation. The token is used to pay for transaction fees on the network. Secondly, you've got this concept of building software applications. Again, using the token to buy into the virtual machine, use the resources of the network to actually run your logic on your applications. Thirdly, developing and launching interchain bridges. So you need the token to actually create a bridge between Aion 1 and any blockchain that connects to Aion 1. And then on that bridge, the decentralized group of nodes that build these bridges can then earn tokens as data passes across their bridge. So these bridges are essentially sitting at the intersection of different blockchains to be able to transmit messages across blockchains. And then finally, using the token to create new participating blockchains. Because of our focus on the enterprise market, the one thing we noticed is that over the last few years, you've seen an enormous amount of custom work in the blockchain space for enterprise. Everybody building their own custom infrastructure, their own custom protocols. Over time, we envision that this is going to be a much more automated process where your requirements lead to a set of components that get assembled and a blockchain gets deployed for your use that has whatever governance, consensus, privacy requirements you need that connects into an ecosystem of connected blockchains through the Aion protocol. We're releasing with our token this week. The first version or the first functionality of our token is to build kind of participating blockchains. How do you spin up a custom modules-based blockchain that can solve certain components of what your requirements are that eventually will be able to bridge into the Aion protocol. So this is going to be available for token holders that are purchasing as part of our pre-sale this week. We're in the midst of our second round of our pre-sale right now. It's live on our website at aion.network. We've already raised $22 million to date. We're targeting a public sale later in 2017. But if anybody has any interest, by all means, find out about us online. Lots of online chat going on around us. Our team's in Toronto. This slide's about a month outdated, so I've got to go add a few more faces. We're about 25 people. We've been operating in this industry as a group of founders for about 4 years, as a team for about 2 years, and we're really, really focused on solving this problem. So, if you're interested, please reach out to us. Thanks a lot.